Looks like we're live. So, as always, if and you support these programs, even these film reviews, which are briefer than, of course, the long form conversations that take place in the podcast, you can join the YouTube channel directly, which is nice. But I probably prefer that you subscribe to the Substack. It's probably the easiest thing for most people to do, oxum.substack.com. But I'm also open to Patreon, patreon.com/oxum. The Patreon probably gets the most support, but the Substack are people whose ethos I trust the most. And so directing you there is the best. But as always, I follow the advice of Wu Tang Financial, which I heard in either 2002 or 2003. You got to diversify your bonds, nigga. And I suggest you do the same. But this is not investment advice. This is a film review of Foxcatcher, which I saw recently, which follows the odd spoiler alert murderer, billionaire, millionaire, whatever he is, rich guy, John DuPont, and the Olympic wrestler, Dave Schultz, whose brother, Mark Schultz, has, I think, a biopic on him in his fight against Big Daddy Kane. Or I don't know, maybe the biopic is about Dave Schultz. I haven't seen the biopic. I saw the documentary, which is on Netflix. And Joe Rogan is famous for shitting on the biopic as changing real life details. I think turning Big Daddy Kane into a Russian or something like that. Whatever, messing up some sort of biographical details like I'm doing right now because I haven't seen that film. And you can catch the actual fight of Mark Schultz on YouTube. So type Mark Schultz UFC or Mark Schultz fight, and you could probably watch the whole thing. It's like 9 minutes or 10 minutes, and it's pretty amazing to see the value of American wrestling applied to a real fight. Well, it's MMA, but a simulated real fight, as close to a real fight as you can get while still remaining somewhat safe. And in general, I find value in wrestling, but I find it inferior to what the Japanese have developed for centuries and the Brazilians added some fine tuning to in judo and in jiu-jitsu or Gracie jiu-jitsu. The judo rules have changed so that leg grabs are not there, and that's mostly a funding thing and an Olympics thing, which is stupid. I wish they would make some sort of old pancreas event where you're, wearing you're as scantily clothed as possible, and so you can't have advantage from the clothing, and you have striking and grappling that's not kimono dependent. So the one thing that wrestlers do is great is they don't have the kimono, which I appreciate. I like the little leotards or whatever it's called that they wear. Um, but I think they subject themselves to the uppercut and to knees too much. Whackable Patty. Oh, thanks for joining in. Thank you for that gift. Yeah, you got to catch a stream. The thing about my streams is I don't really time them. My schedule is so odd. Today I thought I was actually going to work, but I ended up not working. My students of jujitsu and debate were on a field trip today for this little 3-week course that I'm doing at this independent school. So I didn't study schedule well enough. So I'm like, hey, why don't I head home again and stream? So here I am talking to you about Team Foxcatcher. So anyway, Dave Schultz, Mark Schultz, as you could tell probably from their names, have a sort of West Asian pedigree. I think West Asia has produced a lot of great wrestlers from the northern tip in the Caucasus, where you have the Dagestanis and the Chechens, which are getting famous now in wrestling, in judo, and in the UFC and in other MMA promotions, notably Khabib Nurmagomedov's Eagle promotion. You'll see a lot of them. You'll see them in the PFL. You see them in the UFC. You see them all over the place. But as you go more south to the Iranians, which obviously have the Indo-European layer to them, but they're also West Asian, and obviously the North Caucasus people have that extra European layer as well. But the West Asian element goes down all the way to Syrians, Assyrians, Armenians, down to Ethiopia itself, which is the subject of this podcast, where they get mixed with East Africans, of course, who are themselves already pre-mixed with some sort of unknown Southwest Asian or something like that, some sort of Eurasian. Anyway, Dave Schultz is the main subject, and this is kind of a story of the Mad King, and it doesn't tell you how to prevent it, but through your own analysis, you could see how to prevent the Mad King. Wackable Patty says time zones are the devil. Indeed, they are. Indeed, they are. And the devil is in the details. And the details of this film, Team Foxcatcher, I think I caught it on Netflix, but maybe you could catch it elsewhere, is that John DuPont, this rich guy, says he wants to sponsor a number of sports, and he does so. And at a certain point, he decides to sponsor wrestling, which he hadn't done before. And he begins wrestling with the wrestlers as well. And the reason that people take this lunatic's and later murderers' money, spoiler alert again, there it is that they are short for cash. Team USA, USA Wrestling is short for cash. I think the Mad King element here is that you have an individual, you have a monarch, you have a king of sorts who's using his patronage, old school style, to fuel sports. And it's great that he's doing that. But the question is, what is his motivation? And it's never clear what it is, but it seems to be some sort of living out of a fantasy of a childhood that he lost because he was a super rich guy, which has kind of it rhymes with the story that we know of Michael Jackson and his youth and the roller coasters and the kids he attracted to his home as an old man. So this one is not so much about sexual weirdness, but a strange old man who doesn't have a realistic view of himself because he has too many yes men around him because they are reliant upon his money. But Dave Schultz, the Olympian, kind of overlooks a lot of the oddities that he sees John DuPont doing, sometimes pulling out a gun on his family and on others, sometimes drunk, sometimes paranoid. Maybe he's on other drugs. They don't know. And they have a good run. I don't know how long it goes, a year, 2 years, 3 years, or whatever. And the team is getting sponsored and they're doing well after having lost to the Russians so many years ago. And Dave talks about how he admires the Russians. They even bring on a Bulgarian guy, and their the family's relationship kind of sours, although they were great at first. After John DuPont eventually does what a lot of people predicted and goes crazy and murders Dave Schultz in cold blood. And he kind of has a standoff with the police too, where he thinks that his house is his own territory, that his house is like its own country. It has its own sovereignty of sorts. And part of what allows him to do that is it's not just Team USA that he has living on his property and all these different sports, but he goes like bird hunting and shooting with the local police. So you have a lot of police who are kind of, they might have to recuse themselves in the trial. I don't know. But the trial happened and he was found guilty. Somehow, I think his money continued helping the Bulgarian wrestler who he brought, who initially had a really close relationship with his own kids and the kids of Dave Schultz, but was estranged because he kept taking that rich guy's money even while he was in jail for having murdered his teammate, because the guy needed his money and it was kind of a practical thing about his life. Maybe it had to do with his visa status as well. So maybe it's an immigration story. But the idea here is that in order to prevent a mad king, you need an accountability mechanism. It's great to receive patronage from one really rich person. It would be great if I had that too. If some millionaire gave me $1 million for my podcast, I would love that. But the question would be, what are the strings attached? What is it that he desires? How am I beholden to him? What accountability mechanism is there to check this guy from abusing me and abusing my audience? So Team USA had many reports of strange activity, of activity that would definitely be calls for building a backup plan. And what they should have done is come up with more and more creative ways of fundraising so that they could support their team without relying on this one guy, or at least they could diversify their bonds, as Wu-Tang Financial has advised some 20 years ago, as I mentioned earlier on in this recording. So anyway, it's a story of fundraising desperation leading to seeking out patronage of a really rich patron, and how far are people willing to go? How many signs are people willing to see before they abandon ship? If there's a cannonball hole in your ship, if there are killer animals on your ship, how many signs do you have to see on your ship before you abandon ship or mutiny against the captain of the ship? All these questions are answered while you get to watch a lot of incredible wrestling and grappling footage that I think is an important story and reminds me of the beauty of monarchy, but also the dangers of monarchy, the beauty of heroes, the beauty of rugged individuals, and the sport, which is, they call it a team foxcatcher, but at the end of the day, wrestling is a one-on-one sport, and the ups and downs that could come along with that, and what happened in the aftermath to all of the people that were involved. Birhanu Nagatu, how are you? First time attending live. Dananing Xiarig Maska, Niseb Bag Xiavir, Watra Samu, Amas Nafamid, Raskas Nafamid. So there's a little Guz and Amharic for you all for the day. Adam, thoughts on the idea of an economically socialist monarchy? Yeah, sure. Why not? It's up to the monarch to decide. And then you have whatever accountability mechanisms you have on the monarch. I think people, when they view the left wing and the right wing, are confused because I think it's more about the structure than the individual policies. And what we have found out recently, for example, a lot of people hate Bolsonaro, right? He's a right wing extremist, but Bolsonaro has canceled 92% of the student debt of Brazil. Uh, Maybe the debt in total, but I think it was student debt, and that's pretty incredible. I heard a report that the Russians took over some part of the Ukraine in the current war, and the first thing they did was abolished all of the outstanding like bankruptcies and debts and so many things. Imagine a super based monarch who outlaws usury, is the outlaw of usury, a practice that I think Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all, at least at face value, are against, but all of the postmodern society that we're living in practices usury all over the place. I think even our liturgy, the Giz liturgy, is against usury as well. Lawandamu ba'arata yalbadara is a line that I recall in Amharic. I don't ask me which liturgy, but I remember it from the liturgy. The one who doesn't lend to his brother with interest, like that's the righteous man, according to the Gizrite liturgy. I'd have to find the exact quote. I don't know where it is, but if one of you could find it, that would be great too, and you can let me know, and I'll know for better reference next time. But a sort of a based monarch who decided to outlaw usury. Would that be considered socialist? Yeah, yeah, maybe it would be. You know, again, what Bolsonaro in Brazil and what the Russians are doing in terms of abolishing debt. Is that considered a socialist monarchy? Maybe it is. Walkable Patty, I suppose Norway would be the closest thing to that model. That's a capital M monarchy anyway. Yeah, I don't know enough about the Norwegian situation. I do know that I used to be an ombudsman, which is this great Norwegian word, Swedish as well. And the ombudsman is this very interesting thing that they began very formally, I think, in the 1800s with the Scandinavian kings, and it was the representative of the people. So that's a great accountability mechanism for the king. So you have the king running the affairs, and the ombudsman. His job is to be the voice of the voiceless, the voice of the people, to hear their complaints and to address them for anything that the government is doing against them. In fact, in Ethiopia today, they allegedly have one, and people used to joke when I was in this field. They're like, "Why don't you go be the ombudsman of Ethiopia?" Because during Wayani, they that office was pretty useless. I don't know what it's doing now, but I bet it's pretty useless now too. So it was called Ye'enbat Abaki, or Akabe'en, which is the protector or keeper or shepherd of tears, which is a great title in and of itself. Anyway, I want to remain on topic. So here, Team Foxcatcher, wrestling, murder trial, patronage, money. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, I see about 4 of you here right now about this, please let me know and I'll try to address those. Otherwise, we could head out shortly. Alam, your patience must be golden for that kind of job. It is. You know, I have a good Mexican Chinese friend. He's been on the program, Armando Yi Jr., and he tells this story all the time. I told him one time, and I didn't think much of it, but it stuck with him. I used to work in the Stanley Mosque courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, California. And there was a case that I had one time where this couple had sent their car and they left it at this mechanic, this auto repair. And the auto repair had kept it like super long, like 5 weeks, 6 weeks. I don't remember the specifics, and probably good not to break confidentiality with too much specifics. So I'm just telling you the story generically. And what happened was they ended up charging that couple like daily rates for holding their car, like as if they left the car there to like be watched while they were out of town or something, which is not. They send it there for repairs, and usually people don't charge for that. So anyway, it was in the thousands. So they got pissed off and they ended up suing the people for thousands. So the car repair is in court suing the couple for not paying the daily rate. And then the couple is there suing them for not fixing their car for so long and then trying to charge them. So one of the disputants, a lady, was super pissed. I had them in a what's called shuttle diplomacy. So I had the car repair representative on one bench about 20 yards away, or 20 meters away for those of you abroad, and I had the couple on another bench, and so they could sort of see each other, eye each other, mad dog each other, but they couldn't really hear each other. They were out of earshot, out of ear hustling range. So she begins kind of talking to me, and she's a little calm at first, but as time progresses, she gets madder and madder, and eventually she's yelling in my face like, "I'm not gonna give them a dime. They need to be paying me $2,000 or $3,000, whatever the amount was. It was a small claim, so it's $10,000 or less." And I just sit there and I'm like, okay, all right, all right. And so if they meet this, that, and a third concern, would that suit you? And I'm in a totally calm disposition. And I think there's a combination of my calm disposition, not freaking out as she's yelling and probably spitting, on my suit. You got to wear a full suit, even if you don't have dress socks, they kick you out of the courthouse. So at least on the worker employee side, not necessarily the disputant side. And so she sees that my calm demeanor taking in all of her wrath that is I'm being the conduit of her wrath from which she is feeling of the car repair people. And finally she gets out of breath from shouting so much, and it was about 10 minutes straight of her doing that. I'm allotted about 20 minutes to 2 hours to do these things. They already have litigation, and my job is to take them physically out of the courtroom. And if I can get a written settlement agreement, I get a written settlement agreement. If not, then have a nice day. The judge is going to make a judgment either way. So she finishes and she's breathing deeply, and she's like, "Wow, how much are they paying you?" And at the time I was in grad school, so it was volunteer work. And I explained that to her. It was really academic credit that I wasn't making money. And she didn't believe me. She's like, "No way." And um, she was so impressed with my calm demeanor, with my ability to actively listen to the points that she was making, and my creativity in trying to come up with a compromise between where they were at and where the auto repair people were. And eventually they came up with a deal. The auto repair people fixed their car and gave them some amount of money that was less than what they were asking, and waived all the daily rate fees. And they signed a written settlement agreement, and the court stamped that. So anyway, my Mexican friend loves that story, and that's the sort of an anecdote about the patience that I have to be the ombudsman. I know you probably know some Scandinavian language, Adam. So maybe you've heard of the ombudsman or you've used it before. So anyway, if Berhanu or Alam or Whackable Patty or anyone else in the next 30 seconds to a minute, if you have a question about the film Team Foxcatcher, which is the tragic story of the murder of an American Olympian wrestler, but also a larger story about patronage, about giving money to the arts, about giving money to the sciences, and How could those people creatively grassroots bottom up fundraise versus getting top down fundraising? What are the pluses and minuses of both? How can we critically think about money, which is the root of many evils? No questions, no comments, no concerns. If not, I could wish you all a happy Friday. If I haven't said it yet, in the community section, happy and blessed feast of Saints Peter and Saint Paul, according to the Good is Right, as well as the annual Hamle holiday or July holiday of the Holy Trinity. The Olympian, Alam says, who is this Olympian? The Olympian is Dave Schultz, Dave, or probably his real name is David, and then Schultz, Schultz. And his brother, Mark Schultz, fought, I believe, in the UFC, but definitely in MMA at least one time. Masikar, haven't watched the movie, but what are your thoughts on patronage of the arts today versus in the medieval era? Well, I think in the medieval era, I mean, if we look at Ethiopia, for example, I think almost every church was pretty much founded by an aristocratic patron who gave money and land so that they could build a church. And then often the villages and then cities were built around those. You know, a lot of places in Ethiopia have the kind of names associated with it, right? Like Debre Marcos, Debre Elias, Debre Berhan, like anything with Debre means mount in it. And the mount or mountain is kind of a metaphor or a simile for the Zion, for the high place in the wilderness where people believe they're closer to God. And in fact, many Ethiopian churches are on like hills and in caves and things like that. And anyway, people build communities around that, very similar to the Judaic tradition, they're the West Asian connection again, of building synagogues that are walking distance from you. Theirs is for more literal interpretations of the Sabbath, where you should be walking and not really using anything else technologically. But whether we have that or not, and we did honor the first Sabbath, and there were a lot of controversies in Ethiopia over that. But a lot of churches in Ethiopia are walking distance from people, and it's a beautiful thing. I would see people making the sign of the cross, and every day as they go to work, to school, and back, and they would go to night services, whether it's singing or sermons or things like that, or just to catch a blessing, looking at the spectacle of the building, the fence, the land surrounding it, and throwing up a prayer to God as they're on the go. So I think that sort of patronage led to a lot of great things. I think it was a fantastic system. I think a lot of laws in the West, probably since the Enlightenment, have been built to destroy dynasties. In America, I could talk to you about the death tax, which is also called the estate tax, where they take like 25% of your property upon your death. That's crazy. That's super crazy. A fourth of what you own. And I think things like that are meant to not allow dynasties, but I think dynasties have a sense of ownership of their community. And that sense of ownership allows them to want to give back in ways that people either are not capable of or not willing to. Now, of course, there's still a lot of charity and patronage. You see it on Gumroad, you see it on Patreon, you see it in Substack, and you see me messing with those things, right? But I think now it's a little bit more decentralized. And that's not ultimately the worst thing. It's good to have small donations and big donations. Everything counts for the causes of the arts and the sciences. But yeah, I like the old system and I think it could be upgraded. I'm always interested not in the lukewarmness of the present, but the greatness of future technology and the greatness of the Lindy things of the past. So we can take the Lindy or time tested, time trial passing patronage of the arts of the medieval era, and we can update it with technology of today, whether it's Zelle or PayPal or Venmo or Cash App or Gumroad or Substack or YouTube directly when you join the channel. All of these things are ways of reinvigorating that patronage. Now, in order to reinvigorate that patronage properly, you got to get people more well established. So you have to build a system where there would be more dynastic wealth, more patrons, more aristocrats. And that is a story for another day. Thank you all for your participation and have a blessed weekend.